So Axie Infinity's infrastructure allowed the game to scale to nearly 3 million users. It's the only Web3 game to reach that level of success. So, what's next? Please welcome to the stage CoinDesk's Rosie Perper and Jeffrey Jihoz Zirlin, the co-founder of Sky Mavis, creators of Axie Infinity.
Good morning. Can you guys hear me? All good? Great. Great to be here. Welcome to day one of Consensus. I'm your host, Rosie Perper, Deputy Managing Editor of the Web3 News section at CoinDesk. So, despite an ongoing crypto winter that has impacted most of the market segments, Web3 gaming continues to be an area of interest for investors and developers. In fact, $739 million was invested in blockchain games in Q1 of 2023. No other Web3 game has been as successful as Axie Infinity, an online ecosystem launched by Sky Mavis in 2018 that allows users to buy, sell, and battle cute NFT characters. To date, users have spent billions on Axie digital assets, and it was even crowned by the Guinness World Book of Records this month as having the highest transaction volume for any NFT collectible game. Axie Infinity is built on the Ronin Network, a custom Ethereum sidechain developed by Sky Mavis. In March of this year, the company announced that it would be overhauling its Ronin blockchain and swapping over to a delegated proof-of-stake consensus mechanism, making the network more secure following a major hack last year. It has also delivered big upgrades to its Axie gameplay and has allowed select partner studios to access the Axie IP for new titles being built on Ronin. So over the next 30 minutes, we'll discuss the game's rise to fame, the bumps along the way, and future plans for success. Joining me today is the co-founder of Sky Mavis, Jeff Zirlin. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah. So let's kick things off. For anyone, I'm sure everyone's pretty familiar with Axie, but if not, can you give a brief overview of the game and its mechanics?
Sure. So we built Axie to introduce the world to Web3 and crypto through something that's nostalgic, right? So Axie reminds people of Pokemon, Tamagotchi, Neopets, the games that we grew up playing. And many of us on the founding team actually discovered NFTs through CryptoKitties and felt like, hey, for the first time, this is something that appeals to the gamers, to the collectors in us. So, yeah.
Awesome. And as we mentioned earlier, Axie Infinity is by far the most popular blockchain game so far. What is the key to Axie's success, and why do you think it's resonated with such a global audience?
I think it's an amalgamation of factors. First, the art is beautiful, it's nostalgic, it's something that can catch someone's attention even if they have no interest at all in crypto or Web3. Second is the way that we built the product in the early days was more akin to how you build a startup or kind of like a product rather than a game, right? We built it out in the open with the community, step by step. We didn't spend years, right, like perfectly honing something behind closed doors and then releasing it and hoping that people loved it, right? We really built it out in the open with the community. Next is that we were early. We were relentless, right? We saw CryptoKitties and then really jumped on the opportunities. So we have this like 5-year jump start where we've been building and iterating in the space alongside the community for a while. And then I think lastly, and perhaps most importantly, is the community, right? We have this group of core missionaries that's been by our side through thick and thin, through a bunch of different market conditions, supporting all our launches. And so yeah, I think it boils down to those factors.
Yeah. And you mentioned building sort of in the public eye and with your community. Can you explain a little bit more of what you mean by that?
So when I discovered Axie as a community member, and when I discovered it in March of 2018, the only thing that you could do with your Axies was actually look at them. And then we slowly rolled out and iterated, right, different features. So we rolled out auto battles. We rolled out the breeding feature, and they were quite simple. and they weren't necessarily fully fleshed out and things that you would consider an amazing or well-polished game, but they helped us build and attract engagement and keep the community busy while we improved and increased the complexity of our products.
Yeah. So getting into, the Axie Infinity game is built on the Ronin blockchain. How are these two entities of Sky Mavis connected, and how do they benefit from each other?
So when we were building Axie, we saw a need for a chain that really catered to games specifically, right? There were a lot of scaling issues on Ethereum, and there were also different products and chains at the time that were attempting to be the scaling solution for games, but they were very small. And one way to look at it is like, you don't want to build your startup on another startup, right? So we initially built a marketplace on Loom Network, which was an early Ethereum sidechain, and the team ended up giving up, right? So we thought, hey, like this is so early, we're having these issues, let's build what we need for ourselves, and then if it works, other people may come to us and want to use it, and that's what we've seen really happen.
Yeah, and so how do the two ecosystems work together?
So Ronin powers the Axie ecosystem, and it wasn't until we actually deployed Axie on Ronin that we started to experience hypergrowth from just very low or free transactions, fast finality, and just really smooth user experience.
Yeah. So going into the mechanics of Web3 gaming, what are some of the challenges of creating a viable in-game economy like the one that Axie Infinity has? And what are some of the do's and don'ts for building a resilient player-owned economy for the long term?
I think one of the things that Web3 game developers need to balance, which is quite difficult, is the speculation and then also the emotional spending, right? There has to be, and there's going to be a lot of speculation, and that's going to be variable depending on the market climate. And then there needs to be emotional spending, right? Just like when I want to buy a Pokemon card, a Charizard, right? I just want it because I grew up wanting it and it's nostalgic and I need it. And I may be able to justify purchasing it to my wife that, hey, like this is a collectible, it's not going to be worth zero. So I think it's that type of spending that will balance and sustain these player-owned economies, but that also requires an IP, a brand that's taken a long time to really build up and harness or garner a large audience. So I think that's the tightrope or kind of balance that Web3 game developers are looking at right now, and yeah, it's not a totally solved problem. Yeah.
And I know that a lot of Web3 games sort of look at Axie as one of the originators, one of the sort of gold standards in Web3 gaming. So what advice would you give to new developers for really how to create a game that people love?
So recently we've been leveraging the Ronin Network to become this place where it's the best place to launch and grow a Web3 game. And one of the reasons that game developers are interested in working with us is that we have this experience of going from 0 to millions of users, of actually scaling a game, of harnessing and growing a community over 5 years, of making the difficult technical trade-offs that come when you're building this type of game. And so yeah, like my advice would be, first of all, to come and talk to us. Someone at Sky Mavis has likely gone through the issue. You may be a good fit for the Ronin Network, so definitely come speak to us about the problems that you're having. And yeah, everyone is going to have different. Everyone's going to have different kind of issues. But I think a lot of the ones that are Web3 specific come around, right, setting expectations and creating agreements with your community. You know, how do you pick the right technical partners to really get your products to the next level.
Yeah, and Web3 gaming, blockchain gaming, I feel like it's a bit of a hot topic now. A lot of money is being poured into Web3 gaming by VCs and major game studios. Square Enix is a big proponent of Web3 gaming, but mass adoption still feels very far away. And I know there's a lot of hesitation from traditional gamers. So how can Web3 gaming really improve? And what do you think is still missing in the space for those folks?
Well, for those of us that have been around since 2018, it still feels like it's huge, right? Because we were there when there were 20 or 30 people in a Discord channel. I do think that, of course, product quality needs to increase. Art quality needs to increase. The storytelling needs to increase. We do need to create a lot more emotion to help drive that sustainable spending that will create these types of economic opportunities for different archetypes within the ecosystem. I think we also need to experiment with more novel mechanics, right? We saw, hey, like an ERC 721 token that can earn an ERC 20 token. That was something that was really interesting to people. Now, an ERC 721 token that can earn ERC 721 tokens, right? So these are kind of Web3 crypto native mechanics that people are finding interesting, but I think there are still many stones to turn over to figure out what are net new mechanics that can't be replicated in these traditional gaming ecosystems. I really think that it's not just about like, oh, improving the graphics, right? I guess with AI these days, like great graphics are gonna become very commoditized. So it's not just about improving the gameplay, improving the graphics. That's what many people will say. But I also think it's about creating net new things that the world has never seen before, right? Like we started this journey by imagining a different type of game, a game that could be more community oriented, a game that could be owned by the community that plays it. And I think it's those types of questions, that type of dreaming that will get us to the next level.
Yeah, and I know a lot of Axie Infinity users, many of them are new to blockchain, many of them are new to NFTs. So how do you entice an audience that is so new and there's so many roadblocks to sort of getting involved?
So first, of course, you have to make it really seamless and enticing to get involved, right? So with Axie, we pay a lot of attention to the art because that's the first impression that the world has of us. And then we are looking at ways to allow people to get started without even downloading a crypto wallet, right? So with Axie Infinity Origins, right, that is on the Google Play Store in certain countries now, right? Like we're looking to get it on the App Store. You can actually get started with free starter Axies, so you don't actually even need tokens or a wallet to get started. I also think it's about education, right? So Axie became quite famous for this word scholarship, but the actual root of that was that by playing Axie, you could actually learn about Web3. And we actually believe that learning about Web3 is a major benefit because it's a new form of financial literacy. Right now, the world doesn't really believe that yet. Right? So it's like the education aspect of it gets underplayed. But I do think that education is so important, and I actually think that education can be one of the primary benefits.
Absolutely. Going back into the past, it's been 1 year since a $625 million Ronin Network hack, the largest hack of a blockchain network to date. So where are things at now, and how have things changed for Sky Mavis since?
Sure, so we see our response to the incident as a badge of honor, right? So thankfully, we're really proud that all users were repaid and were made whole. That's number one, really important to iterate that. And then two, right, we learned a lot of lessons, right? Of course, on the rush and on the path to mass adoption, we made some trade-offs. But since then, we've expanded the validator set. That was a big part of what DPoS was about. We even added Google to the validator, right? So we've definitely shored up the security and made massive improvements there. And I also think that the breach was this moment for the community to really rally around the flag, to understand, hey, like we're in this for the long haul. If we can go through that and we can survive that, then we can survive anything. So right after it all went down, I actually read Laura Shin's book, about the Ethereum community and how the DAO hack was actually this existential moment that really defined the community for so many years later. And I really see that a huge parallel where sometimes these existential moments that almost kill a community, they're really important for making sure that the foundation is really there. Some of the people in the community, of course, they left. Like, to be honest, like, good riddance. Maybe like they were low conviction and this wasn't the right fit for them. But I also can't blame them because that was such a scary time to go through.
Right. And so now the Ronin Network is making a lot of improvements. So talk about some of those improvements and how it will make things more secure.
Sure. So we recently just upgraded to DPoS, where now the Ronin Network is actually secured by the gamers that are using it. So we have an awesome list of validators, some from the community. Some of those community members that are running validators are actually even in the audience here. But we've also, we have validators like Google, Nansen, Animoca Brands, nonfungible.com, DappRadar. The list goes on. So upgrading to DPoS was really important and really upgrading the network and getting it ready for the next stage of growth.
Right. And one of the things that I'm most excited about as an Axie lover is that you've recently opened up the Axie IP to select partner studios. And you said to my colleague, Sam Kessler, last month that Sky Mavis is building out this ecosystem of infinite experiences. So what does that mean?
So when we think about the benefits of a Web3 game, I think one of the things that is underexplored and not discussed enough is that if your NFT can act as this access card to an entire content library, right, then that is true fundamental value. And we're starting to see that unfold within the Axie universe, where not only is Sky Mavis building amazing experiences within the Axie ecosystem, leveraging the Axie IP, but we have community members. We have different game studios that are coming attracted by the IP, right? We have game studios that have garnered or gotten millions of downloads, like Team Bali that we recently announced on the Ronin Network. They worked on Anipong, a game in South Korea that my mom even played, right, with over 70 million downloads. And they came to us not because they wanted to create a Web3 game, but because they wanted to create an Axie game. They loved the IP, and it was really enticing to them, and they saw an opportunity to kind of touch into a new market, a new community.
Right. So are we going to start seeing Axie t-shirts and Axie TV shows? What's the end goal?
I think the core really has to be the games, the experiences. That has to be rock solid. Of course, I think an end game is, of course, becoming like this IP that really touches a bunch of people and has, mangas, comics, merch, movies. But I think the core and the focus has to be on the games, the experiences. Those have to be amazing first.
Right. So you're working with game studios to launch new products on Ronin. There are so many options when it comes to different blockchains or different studios to work with. Why would these studios choose to build on Ronin?
So what they say themselves is they love to work with us because we've actually gone through the process of going from 0 to millions of users. And we faced the problems, the pitfalls, the speed bumps on that journey. We've been doing it for 5 years. There's really nobody in the world that's been building these types of experiences for 5 years, so that comes with a wealth of experiences. The Ronin is also tailor-made for blockchain games, right? It's kind of minimalist and simple and beautiful in that way, where it has what you need to deploy a game and nothing more, right? Of course, we'll make it more complex and we'll add different tools and apps over time, but it's really tailor-made specifically for games. I think, and then last is this community. We have an amazing community of hundreds of thousands of Web3 gamers. You can only find that on Ronin. And we have amazing creators that are making YouTube content, that are streaming on Twitch, people who understand how to mod discords, right? So these almost like these Web3 native skills. So Yeah, those are some of the reasons that game studios love to work with us.
Yeah, it's a very valid points. I think we do have some time for Q&A. If anyone has any questions. Yeah, stand up.
How are you guys thinking about rentals? Will you even kind of do a reward share and flat rate rentals? How are you guys thinking about that?
I'll just repeat the question so everyone can hear. So the question is, how is Sky Mavis thinking about rentals?
So we saw with the huge run in 2021 that, there was the rise of this scholarship system. I think that from our side, we're more focused on building amazing experiences and then also attracting enough emotional spending so that it's not just the in-game economy isn't reliant or overly reliant on speculative spending. I think, as we crack that, then the issues around, hey, like doing lending and renting, that will actually probably be solved by community developers building and deploying things on the Ronin Network.
Anyone else have any questions? Come close to the stage so we can hear you.
So, yeah.
Oh, great.
There's a mic over there.
Lead to the rescue.
So there's a lot of new, EIP developments that's dedicated for Web3 gaming. So you have, specific EIPs that you think that are, worthwhile that we should look into, and you guys are looking into as well.
I think the question is around: are there any specific EIP standards that we find interesting or that we're looking into, right? Yeah, I mean, so there are definitely a lot of interesting developments around wallet abstraction, for example, in smart contract wallets. So I think that will, the UX around onboarding everyday people to crypto wallets, I think it will improve quite dramatically in the years to come. And it's I think people have been talking about this for a while, but it really seems like the research is, and the production is actually really starting to come through. I also think that there will be a bunch of really interesting dynamic NFT standards that arise where you can look at an NFT and learn more about the owner than just how rich they are, right? What they've actually accomplished. Maybe things that are happening in the outside world, right? Through some integration of oracles. So those are some of the things that we're interested in. But yeah, definitely let me know if you see anything out there that we should be looking at.
We've got another question over here.
Oh, good morning.
Good morning.
So you mentioned that other gaming companies are starting to get involved with you. So if we have a gaming company, how do we reach you?
Yeah, that's a good question. So you should go to roninchain.com, and there will be a form that you can fill out, and people from the Ronin Network team will review it and hopefully get in touch.
Okay, so you mentioned that you're allowing other game studios to use your IP, correct, in developing Axie games. Does that also include, say, a game studio who has created a game? Can you hear me?
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
Okay. So does that also include a game studio that has, say, created a game, but they're importing other IP besides Axie, say, like Bored Ape or whatever, and Axies can be imported into the game?
That's a great question.
We've seen some experiments around that, for sure, but I think the main source of interest has been definitely around, right, either reskinning a game as an Axie game or just using our IP. This idea of a horizontal kind of metaverse where all these IPs commingle and kind of collaborate. That's still something that hasn't totally come together yet, but definitely something that we'll keep an eye on.
I would play that game.
Hello. Hey, so you've created the #1 Web3 gaming game so far. What do you think about Yuga's other side, and what do you think about Dookie Dash specifically?
It's clear that they've had a lot of success and they've executed quite well. So I would say that they're definitely one of the teams in the space that we look to for look at what they're doing with interest. And so I definitely have respect for them.
I'm going to piggyback off of that question. Is there, not that there's not enough room, but how can all of these different platforms coexist with one another? And I think that there's an idea that ultimately all of these games and all these metaverse platforms are going to sort of be one. But how do you see sort of the future of what that looks like?
I think it will be more complex than people are thinking. But I actually think that the first step will be people saying, hey, like, you own that NFT, you qualify for this NFT, right? Our NFT. Actually, in the early days, that's one of the ways that we grew, right? It was like, oh, you own a CryptoKitty, you own land in Decentraland, like, we're gonna give you some Axies. So I think that a lot of the early experiments will look like that. It won't necessarily be like symbiotic. It will be more like, oh, you're a member of the NFT gaming community, like, we'll give you something, try out our game, and maybe you want to become part of our community.
Definitely.
So you grew massively in emerging markets, especially Southeast Asia, Venezuela. Do you think there's a way that you can gain back those early users, or do you think the new wave of Axie and Ronin is just going to bring on other users, considering that some of these older users might have felt a little bit betrayed, that they thought they were going to continue making money and now they didn't? So do you see these guys as past customers or still current users or future users even?
Yeah, so many of our users are still in these emerging markets despite the the limited earning potential during the bear market. So I do think that part of our strategy around emerging markets will continue to be really strong. And I do think that, right, there's always these huge, massive expectations that develop during bull cycles, and it's hard, right? Even Bitcoin miners mine at a loss during bear markets as well, right? So it's still yet to be seen what will happen in future cycles, right? Like, NFT gaming is still on its kind of first cycle, so it's kind of like 3 or 4 cycles behind Bitcoin and Ethereum. So it's still too early to really say what the future of these kind of player-driven economies will look like, especially in these emerging markets.
I think we have time for one more question. Otherwise, oh.
Hi, yeah, so you've talked a little bit about smart contract wallets or smart wallets. How do you kind of see the next layer for like onboarding the next like billion gamers, and then especially as users are like cross-chain? So like I've spoken to some of the studios that are actually wanting to build on Ronin, and we're doing like a payments thing for it, but I'm just kind of curious, what are you thinking about that like long term?
I'm bearish on UX improvements being the key to unlocking mass adoption and hypergrowth. I think that it's inevitable that UX improvements will come and happen over time, but I think that these moments where we have kind of a shift or a warp in the level of adoption come about through fundamental innovations where you build a mechanic that's never been seen before. So I think it will be about inventing things rather than improving things. And it's always hard to predict inventions. I think, but novel mechanics related to tokenization, I think that is where the most special catalysts will come from.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you guys for being here. Jeff, great talking to you.
Thanks for having me.